Let's go to the host of Power and Politics, David Cochrane, for some analysis on this. David, Poilievre has been slipping in the polls and facing criticism in some devastating ad in particular for being too much like Trump. How do you think these comments by Trump are going to have an impact on Poilievre? Will they hurt or help?
Well, the short answer is things are just too volatile to really know. But Pierre Poilievre does have a Donald Trump problem because, look, the Conservative coalition has within it a segment of its voting base that kind of likes Donald Trump. I mean, there are a lot of pictures of members of the Conservative caucus, members of the Conservative campaign team, including the top officials, wearing red Make America Great Again hats that, have surfaced from over the years. And one of the first moves that Pierre Poilievre tried to do politically when he became leader was to try to, win back that percentage of the electorate they lost in the last election to the People's Party of Canada. So they've fairly successfully grafted a lot of that back into their coalition. But if you get into a big fight with Donald Trump, where do those people go? Already there's some criticism, from key members of the convoy that occupied Ottawa, saying that, Pierre Poilievre is not, conservative enough on some of these things. So how far can he go in dealing with this without alienate some of the more challenging elements of the Conservative voting cohort, which is certainly not the mainstream by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not a statistically insignificant one. But as you mentioned, these contrast ads showing how much he is like Donald Trump in terms of the way he talks about the challenges in Canada, vilifies media, vilifies experts, that has become a problem for him as Trump has become ascendant and blotted out all the other issues. So anything that gives Pierre Poilievre a little bit of daylight between the MAGA president is probably a good thing for him. But what you saw on one side of the voting cohort maybe is a challenge on the other side of it. And balancing all of that is a real challenge for a Conservative leader.
Yeah, and we saw how Poilievre tried to wrap himself up in those comments and use them to his advantage. What about Mark Carney? Can he use Trump's remarks to his advantage?
Well, look, the Liberal strategy is kind of not to respond to every single thing Donald Trump does, but rather use him as the wedge for which to contrast Mark Carney with Pierre Poilievre. I asked Melanie Joly about this on my show today when the Foreign Affairs Minister was in the studio. She said Canadians are just relieved that there is an adult in the room. And this is what you hear from Mark Carney, is that I've got a serious resume. I've been a central banker in Canada and in the United Kingdom. Pierre Poilievre is a career politician. Who do you want dealing with Donald Trump? The guy who's managed the global financial crisis, the guy who's dealt with Brexit, or the guy who's been an MP for his whole career? Now, the Conservatives will say an experienced politician is what you need in this particular moment, but the contrast is what the Liberals are really counting on, that they've got a serious guy now. Sort of things have changed dramatically since Justin Trudeau left. Whether he was serious or not, he was no longer being taken seriously by Canadians. Carney to this point is, and it's that contrast with the sort of chaotic president, and the aggressive opposition leader. They're saying, look, we've got the steady guy here. This is who Canadians need at this point in time.
More broadly, David, how much of a factor do you think Trump is going to be in shaping the election campaign here in Canada?
He's changed everything. I mean, when Justin Trudeau quit on the 6th of January and then Donald Trump was inaugurated on the 20th of January and then the tariff war started, basically on the 1st of February, it has shifted everything in Canadian politics and it's going to keep shifting everything in Canadian politics. 60 days ago, a Conservative majority north of 200 seats and Prime Minister Poilievre was a near certainty. Now, when you look at the election models projecting where it will go, the Liberals are favored to win, not just the most seats. At this moment in time, a majority is in play. They were facing extinction as they went into the Christmas holidays. Now they have a chance to win a fourth term with maybe even a bigger majority. And so much of that is caused by two things. Justin Trudeau left, and Donald Trump has become the main character in Canadian politics. He is defining the agenda and the response. Canadians have responded to it. And Mark Carney has stepped into this moment that, as we speak right now, before the election, before the votes, it has put the Liberals in the most favorable political position they've seen in nearly a decade.
Yeah, it is a remarkable turnaround, but of course we have a whole election campaign ahead of us. Sure. David, our show is always better when you're on it. Thank you very much.
Man. See you, man. Thanks.
Okay, let's get some more analysis on this. Hamish Telford is an associate professor of political science at the University of Fraser Valley, and normally you're based in Abbotsford. I don't know, do we call that an hour and a half drive east of here? It depends on the time of day.
Yes.
We're lucky you're doing some chores in Vancouver, so we get to talk to you in person. What do you make of what Donald Trump said yesterday?
Like with so much that Donald Trump says, it's really hard to know what he's really getting at. Is he trying to make things easier for Pierre Poilievre by saying to Canadians, he's not really MAGA, you don't have to fear this person? Or is he trying to put pressure on Pierre Poilievre, knowing that a lot of Conservatives in Canada support Donald Trump, and maybe they want him to be more MAGA? It could be either. And as Pierre Poilievre is trying to spin this, he's saying that Donald Trump wants to work with Liberals because they're weak. Maybe that's that's plausible as well. It's really very difficult to know with Donald Trump.
One of the reasons we invited you in is you're a political science professor. You're not a political partisan, and you can kind of weigh in fearlessly with your analysis. So let me say, the moment that Trump's comments made the news, we started getting emails on this show from people saying one thing, which was, of course, this was Trump pretending to not like Poilievre to try to boost Poilievre's standing in among Canadian voters, that this was all part of a plan. What do you think of that?
Again, I'm not sure. He's obviously weighing in on our soon-to-be election. For what purpose, we don't really know. Political scientists, international relations scholars have long said countries don't have friends, they have interests. And I don't think Donald Trump really has friends as a politician, unless you happen to be an authoritarian leader in some country. He seems to have an affection for Vladimir Putin. Otherwise, I don't think he really does have friends. Being a conservative is not necessarily helpful. In his last term in office, he did not get along with British Conservative Prime Minister Theresa May, Conservative Chancellor of Germany Angela Merkel. Maybe that's because he didn't like working with women. Difficult to know, but I don't think necessarily being a conservative helps with Donald Trump. Again, impossible to read the man's mind.
We are almost certainly days away from the beginning of a federal election campaign in Canada, and it appears right now that the ballot box issue may be who is the best Canadian leader to deal with Donald Trump effectively. What's your perspective on that?
Again, that would appear to be the ballot box question. Certainly the polls have, the whole election question has changed dramatically from last year, where it was going to be a referendum on Justin Trudeau and the carbon tax. Both those things are gone now, and Canadians are confronted with Donald Trump. So I think a lot of Canadians are trying to answer that question. But it may also be the case that this is now a referendum about Pierre Poilievre, because Canadians don't know Mark Carney very well. They know Pierre Poilievre very well. Of course, over the course of the campaign, they'll get to have a better sense of who Mark Carney is and whether he is the person best positioned to deal with Donald Trump. Certainly, Mark Carney has a very impressive resume working with the Department of Finance, the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, and in a difficult economic moment, that resume may well impress a lot of people.
So your students probably come from all over the place, but you're based in the Fraser Valley, solid conservative country. I mean, you look at the votes, doesn't matter which party is doing best nationally, the Conservatives can count on huge support in the Fraser Valley. So do things feel different on campus when you discuss Poilievre and Carney and Trump than they may on the national stage?
No, they don't. And I think the Fraser Valley is changing. And it's also age-related. Younger people tend to be less conservative than older people. And certainly my students, I don't think, are necessarily representative of the Fraser Valley as a whole. So it's mixed, but perhaps a little bit more progressive than one might imagine for that community.
Well, Hamish, I'm happy you're doing chores in Vancouver and you can speak to us in person. Next time you happen to be in the city, let us know.
Will do, Ian. It's great to see you again in person as well.
Thank you very much.